Oops. Hello. I have a I finally have a little cover on my webcam, but I keep forgetting to take it off. Look, I have a new little we rearranged the photo yesterday. So this shelf is literally empty, but don't I hope it's not unsettling to see an empty shelf. I got this big that shelf over there. That's new. So I took all the books that used to be in this shelf. I moved the books. Well, I'm here with Pearl. I look like I just got out of bed, and I guess I sort of did, but I'm awake, I promise. I just need to look more awake. I'll probably read for not that long today because I feel like I have things to do. But I'm excited. I remember I left off at a kind of exciting part, so we'll see. Pearl's here, so that's what matters. And let me make sure she's in the shot. There you go, Pearl. Okay. Really trucking along here. I feel like the 200s have gone by pretty quickly. We're already, by the end of this, we're definitely going to be at page 250 because I'm currently at the top of page 247. Kind of exciting times. Ansley Wilcox, who had served as a Niagara Park commissioner for 40 years, was a chubby old gentleman with a white walrus mustache. A successful attorney, he lived in a stately Georgian mansion on Buffalo's fashionable Delaware Avenue. But Ansley Wilcox had been a brilliant student at Yale, and after graduation, he had gone on to Oxford. Then, attracted by the ideals of the municipal reform movement, he had spent years campaigning fruitlessly for a civil service merit system for Buffalo. Then he began to fight for parks. This is Ansley Wilcox, and I don't even know who he is. Oh, he's probably, we were just talking about like the old time park supporter guys who initially supported Robert Moses because they were like, oh yeah, he likes parks too. But then Robert Moses kind of screwed them over. So that's probably what Ansley Wilcox is going to be. Okay, while still in his 20s, he determined to rescue the gorge overlooking Niagara Falls from the factories, mills, and cheap rooming houses that were creeping along its edge. Spending 2 years of his own time appraising the land, he had determined that it would take $1,500,000 to condemn it. In 1885, after a courageous and bitter fight, he persuaded the legislature to appropriate the money and create Niagara State Park, which by the 1920s was nationally known, the single most famous park in the country. If Moses had studied Wilcox's life, he might have noticed more than a few resemblances to his own. But Moses was not interested in studying Wilcox's life, and he didn't need Clearwater anymore. Clearwater is another old-time park guy. The two men, the entire Niagara Commission, in fact, were a constant irritant to him. Why? No one could accuse the Niagara Commissioners of excessive conservatism or of being too limited in their aims for improving the Niagara Park, long allowed by the legislature to deteriorate, and for extending the park along with connecting parkways and bridges all along the Niagara frontier. Their aims were, in most important respects, identical with Moses's. So was their insistence on speed. Ansley Wilcox, in fact, had even more reason to want speed than Moses. In 1925, Wilcox was dying of what his obituaries would call the wasting disease, cancer. Okay, I just got a flashback because I actually didn't finish it, but another like hulk of a book that is nonfiction and really good, but just like a big, a big time investment is the book about cancer by I think Siddhartha Mukherjee. I don't know how to say his name, but yeah, it talked a lot about like the evolution of cancer research and the history of cancer. But yeah, I remember the wasting disease. That one I should really pick back up. It was good. It was called, I'm blanking on the name. I like read a bunch of it though during COVID. Emperor of All Maladies, yes. And then I bought his other book, The Gene, and I did the exact same thing. where I bought it. I read probably over half of it straight through, and then I kind of got so like gened out that I was like, I need another book to keep in the rotation because sometimes I want to read, but I don't want to read about genes. And then I ended up just abandoning the gene book, but I really should come back to it because it was good. Okay, anyway, so this park guy got cancer. If you're just coming in, basically, we're in a chapter on page 247 where we're talking about the old-time park reform guys from the late 1800s and like 1910s and 20s, who like really paved the way for Moses in a lot of ways and who initially supported him, but Moses is probably going to screw them over, is what it seems. Okay, so we're talking about one called Annesley Wilcox. Wilcox knew he was dying in 1925. He wanted desperately to see, before he died, at least the beginning of the refurbishment of the park he had created as a young man and had administered frequently with his own money for 40 years, and at least a start on the park extension and parkway that would preserve forever the gorge he loved, Niagara Falls. To speed the refurbishment, which included the acquisition of a new elevator to carry tourists down the cliffs near the falls to the famed Cave of Winds, Wilcox had persuaded another commission member, Paul A. Scholkopf, president of the Niagara Falls Power Company, to have power company engineers draw up plans for the elevator so that construction could begin as soon as funds were allocated. As he had done everything he could to enable the commission to get a fast start on the parkway along the edge of the Niagara Gorge, he did everything he could. Knowing that $1 million allocated to Niagara in the park referendum would pay for only a fraction of the necessary right-of-way, he asked Scholkopf, whose power company owned much of the land along the gorge, to agree to donate easements if the commission acquired the rest of the right-of-way. Scholkopf, who knew the nature of Wilcox's illness and the reason for his desire for haste, agreed. When a small but key parcel came on the market and Wilcox was afraid it would be purchased and developed by private interests, he and Scholkopf purchased it and presented it to the commission as a gift. When two more key pieces came on the market in 1925, he persuaded Scholkopf to have the power company purchase them and hold them until the commission received, at the 1926 legislative session, an appropriation to allow it to purchase them in turn. The admiration in which Wilcox was held helped the parkway along. Several of his friends said that they would buy parcels needed for the right-of-way and give them to the commission in his name, and Scholkopf accepted money to speed the transactions. The only point of contention between the Niagara commissioners and Moses was that the commissioners wanted to carry out the Niagara development themselves to keep, as Moses had solemnly promised that they could, power over the park's development and administration, to remain in charge of what was to them a cherished piece of nature instead of turning it over to a faceless bureaucracy in the park's council offices in New York City, 300 miles away. In so wanting, they stood in the way of Moses's absolute control of state parks. Yes, Pearl is here. Pearl, say hi to your fans. Clearwater, the Niagara Commission's representative on the Parks Council, was a large irritant for the same reason. When the judge argued that the council was only an advisory board and that the regional commissions should be allowed latitude in their work, he was arguing, in effect, against absolute control of all state parks by Moses. And when Alphonse Clearwater spoke, the other council members sitting around the table with him seemed to remember more clearly the promises Moses had given them and the principles of park development that they had once been determined not to surrender. Several times, the judge had even swayed Robert H. Treeman, the chairman of one of the three new regional commissions, and the decisive sixth vote had been cast against a Moses proposal. The refusal of the Niagara Commission to submit to his control had already, Moses complained, made him look ridiculous. In submitting park spending plans to the three-man committee of the governor, Hutchinson and Hewitt, Moses, anxious as always to obtain as much money as possible as quickly as possible, had asked for immediate allocation of Niagara's whole $1 million appropriation. But when Hutchinson asked Wilcox if the commission really needed the whole sum in 1926, Wilcox refused to lie. He said that the commission could use no more than $400,000 of the money in that year. Bye, Pearl. The Niagara Commission's independence was threatening to cause Moses serious problems. While the commission envisioned a complete parkway system around Niagara Falls, he wanted it to extend all the way to Buffalo, 25 miles away. The Niagara commissioners had no objection to the plan, but they didn't want to be responsible for it. They were not trying to build a vast park system. They were interested only in the land they knew and for whose protection they had been fighting for so many years. Furthermore, the parkway Moses wanted would be primarily in Erie County. They felt the newly created Erie County Park Commission should have jurisdiction over it. But the bond issue gave money for improvements on the Niagara frontier only to the Niagara Commission, and they were afraid that under the law, they would be forced to assume responsibility for it. When Moses asked them to give $100,000 of their $1 million for planning of the Erie County section of the parkway, they objected because they felt the whole $1 million was needed around the falls. But they said that they would give it anyway, as long as in return, a law was passed making clear that the portion of the parkway in Erie County was not their responsibility. Pearl's doing the thing where she eats plants. I know that's bad for her, but part of me just isn't that concerned because it's if she were in the wild, she'd be eating plants all the time. A little bit of grass isn't gonna kill her. Anyway. Okay, where was I? So basically the gist of this is just Moses is butting heads with the upstate guys, which has been happening for 150 pages. Moses moved against the Niagara commissioners. First, although they had a superintendent and an engineer to direct the commission's staff and day-to-day affairs, Moses demanded that they appoint an executive officer who they suspected would be one of his men. They refused. Then there ensued in April and May 1926 a number of park council meetings at which the commission had no representative present. Here she is. Clearwater, its authorized representative, was suddenly struck down by an illness so severe that doctors gave him no chance of living. That's not good because Clearwater is about to die, and also Ansley Wilcox is about to die. Wilcox, his authorized substitute, was too weak to take his place, and council members who were friends of the two old men reported that in their absence, vicious rumors, were being circulated about them in whispers at council meetings. Someone, Wilcox felt sure he knew who, was hinting darkly that the Niagara Commission, in making its park and parkway plans, had sold out to the interests of Scholkopf's power company. On June 3, Smith wrote Moses a letter. Wilcox was always to believe that Moses wrote it and persuaded Smith to sign it, asking Moses to investigate transactions and relations between the Niagara Reservation Commission and the power companies, including the reservation of easements by the power companies on land sold by them to the commission. We're really in the weeds here, but I like it. Quote, I also wish to learn, said the innuendo-loaded letter, whether this park commission has laid out a program which will ensure the protection of the Niagara riverfront, or whether they are just buying isolated pieces of land along the banks of the river and leaving the rest of the land in the hands of the power company and other private interests. Wilcox could hardly believe what he read. Moses, he was sure, was behind the letter, But Moses had known and approved of the commission's arrangements with the power company. Next paragraph. But Wilcox had gotten only a taste of what was in store for him. Next paragraph. That was really short. Moses called a meeting of the Parks Council for June 26 to consider the governor's letter. Wilcox, Schoellkopf, and two other Niagara Commission members, Robert W. DeForest and Robert H. Gittins. The Roberts situation is out of control right now. We have two Roberts and Robert Moses, and it's by Robert Caro. Okay. They met and prepared resolutions giving their side of the story and sent them to Moses, asking him to have them read to the council. No Niagara commissioners were present at the council meeting. Clearwater and Wilcox were unable to travel, and they learned after the meeting that Moses had not even told the council about the existence of the resolutions and instead had persuaded it to appoint a 5-member committee to investigate the matter at a hearing at the Parks Council office in New York City on July 15. The committee, the Niagara commissioners realized, was packed against them. There was no old parkman. There was one old parkman, Major William A. Welch of the Palisades Commission, on it, and its chairman, J. Downer of Westchester, although an engineer friendly to Moses and an exponent of the new park theories, was regarded as a man of integrity. But the third member was a representative of Conservation Commission, Alexander McDonald, and Moses and his friend and aide, Henry Lutz, were members ex officio. So Moses had 3 votes out of the 5. I'm hiccuping. This is actually kind of interesting to see how he starts clawing power from the rest of the state. Because you think of him as such a New York City guy, but then I remember, like going into this book, I knew he'd done so much in New York City, but even just in the intro when they talk about how he is behind so much of the development in highways and power systems and parks of upstate New York, I was kind of surprised. But yeah, this is interesting. Here's where it's happening. Okay, whether the only available record of the hearing is complete is impossible to ascertain. The only transcript available was made by Rose Piedrick, Moses' secretary, and Wilcox later complained in a letter to Moses that several times the stenographer was told to omit things or portions of the discussion which were really of the greatest relative significance. These omissions appeared at 2 crucial points in the transcript as discussions off the record, and once Miss Piedrick refers to an argument between Mr. Gittins and Mr. Moses without even telling what the argument was about. Complete or not, however, the transcript is interesting. That was a full paragraph. What are the specific charges against us? Wilcox demanded as soon as the hearings began. There are no charges, Downer hastily replied. This is not an investigation. Take that word from the record. This conference, it is a conference. Substitute the word conference. You mean there is no one willing to stand up here to our faces and make charges? Wilcox asked. No, sir, Downer replied. No charges have been made by anybody so far as I know. The only reason the committee was interested in the commission's relations with the power company, he said, was that the legislature might be reluctant to allocate money for land along the gorge until the power company gave definite written assurances, preferably legal options, that it would give the commission easements over the intervening lands it owned so that the legislature could be assured that the parkway would be continuous. The only thing that the committee wanted was an assurance from Wilcox and Schoellkopf that their informal agreements would be formalized. Did you miss the parkway construction, or is that still coming up? Okay, I don't think you missed the parkway. Well, there's one parkway built, but he wants like a southern and a northern, and I'm pretty sure only one of them is built, and it's not all the way, but there's like a bunch of miles of it built. Because the Long Island Parkway, the one that like we spent 100 pages talking about, has sort of been built. But then this chapter totally switched things up and started talking about upstate developments. So yeah, we haven't even been thinking about Long Island for a while. It was kind of crazy. It was a couple days ago when I was reading, but pretty much in like 2 pages, Robert Caro, the writer, was just like, so then all of the buildings were there. Look at that, and describes how big the buildings are and like how beautiful the beaches are and how popular they are and how even though they have like 10,000 lockers, they have to build more because they're so popular. And it was kind of crazy because we spent so long talking about the meetings and the trials and the press and the meetings and more meetings, and then just like boom, just like that, they got built. Okay. Well, Wilcox said, there is a letter written by Governor Smith implying that we are handling the thing not for the public interest, but for the interests of other people, of the power company, plainly implying it so much that he might as well have charged it in terms, just as plainly as if it were put in a little more brutal language, charging us with collusive and improper relations. If the English language has any meaning, it means that. Where did the governor get his information? False information, outright lies, in fact, on which the letter was based. Moses said hastily, Mr. Downer, may I interrupt a moment? Personally, I regard the question of where the governor got his information as something that we have no right to go into. And Downer hastily agreed. Throughout the hearing, which would go on for 6 hours at a high cost in pain and weariness to Wilcox and to DeForest, who was 79 years old and so ill that he had been in bed for more than a month, the Niagara commissioners would seek to learn what the charges against them were and why. If there were no charges, they had been summoned to New York City. Throughout the hearing, Downer would evade a direct answer, trying to focus attention on a number of minor matters that had nothing to do with the power company. Near the end of the long day, Downer tried to conclude the hearing. Just 1 minute, Wilcox said, and insisted that the big question that appears in the governor's letter be discussed. He made the committee listen while he read into the record Shulkoff's contributions to the Parkway Plan and presented proof that the power company was not getting anything from the informal arrangement and, in fact, was donating to the state land worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The governor's letter talked about transactions and relations between the commission and the power companies, including the reservation of easements by the power companies on land sold to them by the commission, Wilcox said. Why, he said, no power company had ever sold an acre of land to our commission or made any reservation, easements, whatever, on any land whatsoever. And Downer, as if his sense of fairness had at last won over his loyalty to Moses, said for the record that he had, in fact, toured the Niagara site himself and had been impressed with the many things that they, the power company, had planned to do for the furtherance of the Parkway. We have no time to waste in hearing any defense of gentlemen of your reputation as to any collusion with anybody, and this committee will not go into any such question, Downer said. We are not interested, and we do not believe any such things, and have nothing in our minds in regard to it. We know your reputations too well to believe you would do such a thing. There is no such thing in the minds of this committee. And when Wilcox insisted that he be formally exonerated of any wrongdoing in his informal agreements with Shulkopf, Downer said flatly, I have no faults to find with that transaction, a position with which Welch heartily agreed. Moses, who had repeatedly interrupted Downer and the commissioners during discussions of the other minor subjects, had been noticeably silent. Now, he said, I would like to ask, as a question of fact, whether or not the money in the case of the 2 parcels we discussed before was or was not furnished by the power company. And Downer said flatly, what if it was, Mr. Moses? Downer's anxiousness to avoid discussion of the big question, raised in Smith's or Moses's letter, deprived Wilcox of an opportunity to get the committee's approval of acquisition by the power company of a key piece of land that had just come on the market, and that Wilcox was eager to have Shoalcroft snap up and turn over to the commission for the parkway before someone else bought it and began to build on it. This, Wilcox was to say, was a bitter disappointment to him. The opportunity is slipping, and my interest and ability to act are waning, he wrote, and I fear this promising plan may come to naught. But at least the commissioners felt that they had been exonerated. I think I'm going to stop there. We're kind of really in the thick of it, but oh well, I'll figure it out tomorrow. Yes, I felt like this in the last time we like really were in the middle of a court case, which was the Taylor estate thing. I get a little lost in all the details, but oh well, I'll probably get a better sense of it by the end. Whenever we figure out like what it means for Robert Moses, then it'll be fine. But see you later. Back to the piano. Oh, nice. I hope you're Pearl going back to the piano, yeah. She always finds the best spots. Goodbye.